We're about a couple of months, a couple of weeks away from the National Football League draft. And as we do each and every year here on the program, we talk NFL and specific to HBCU players as well. And we're joined by a gentleman, as a matter of fact, an NFL draft analyst for ESPN, a former quarterback at North Carolina Central, also an assistant coach before he got into this side of the business. He is Jordan Reid, and he joins us here on Box to Row. What's going on, Jordan?
It's a pleasure being here. You know, I always love talking to you. We have our random moments of where we run into each other. I remember, I believe it was my senior year. It was 2013. We actually did an interview inside of O'Kelly Riddick Stadium. I don't know if you remember that, but we've come a long way. We've known each other a little over 10 years now, but it's been fun to see how far you've brought your program as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yes, thank you. Because sometimes, man, I mean, you get older, you see the gray, right? You see the gray. So yeah, I can't remember. I remember when you played at Central. You were right before Central made that run, but part of building that right into what Central ultimately became. Let me even start here. What do you remember about those days as the quarterback at North Carolina Central?
It was fun times, man. I love Durham. I love everything about Central's program, and I was at the beginning stages of them transferring over or transitioning over to Division One. It was one of those. It was that 5-year transition period when they were coming over from being Division Two to Division One. So I was part of that, the foundational stages of them transferring over into the MEAC. Back when I believe it was 12 teams back then, if I'm not mistaken, back when they had 12 teams. So we rotated who we played every 2 years. So just those road trips of going to Delaware State and Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M and all these other different schools. It was a fun time. It was the best 4 or 5 years of my life, and I have no regrets of playing at North Carolina Central University.
Yeah, that's right. The MEAC was at its height. Central had joined in 11 permanently. Winston-Salem State, Savannah State had joined also. That was when the MEAC was sort of at its height. So how does one go from being an assistant coach? So you had your playing career, right? How does one go from being an assistant coach at North Carolina Central to what you're doing right now? See you on, ESPN.com and SportsCenter and all of the ESPN shows quite often talking NFL draft.
It's been quite a transition, honestly, just because there's so many different variables and things that went into it. I stopped coaching in 2018. That was the staff that I was with. That was our final year at Central before Trey Oliver transitioned over, and he's doing a heck of a job there now. But I was there during the height of the Jerry Mack era. So we won 3 consecutive MEAC titles from 2014 to 2016. 3 of the best years of my life. I think 3 of the best teams in school history. Unfortunately, we did come up short in the Celebration Bowl against Grambling. That's one game I still have not watched back over until this day. It's just an experience I don't want to relive again. But I have no regrets as far as those 6 years that I spent when I was coaching at Central. I had a ton of fun when I was there. But being on the media side, it has been a little bit of a transition for me, just because during my playing career, my coaching career, media and journalism is something that I've always wanted to get into, but I just couldn't put it at the forefront just because obviously I had other obligations at the time of my playing career and of course with coaching. But took a leap of faith, started a social media account on Twitter. It was called Twitter back then, called X now, whatever you want to call it nowadays. So started posting clips, doing HBCU player rankings, doing HBCU player scouting reports. And lo and behold, out of nowhere, ESPN came out of nowhere and said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to be the understudy of Mel Kiper." And I thought I was being punked at the time when they came and asked me that question, but just took a leap of faith and it ended up paying off for me.
No, it's a beautiful thing. And I got to ask you this. Who gets the responsibility for Malcolm Bell? Like, Malcolm Bell was great. Okay.
Yeah,
he came after you. Is it TC or you that gets the responsibility for the success that Malcolm Bell had?
well, I used to always tell TC. So I was a graduate assistant for 2 years under TC when he was the offensive coordinator at Central. And I always tell him I did the legwork. for developing Malcolm. Just because my first year I was a GA, I worked with quarterbacks, so I was hand to hand with TC. But Malcolm was there during my last 2 years of my playing career. So he essentially was a little brother to me, taking him under my wing and just making sure that the program was going to be in good hands once I did graduate. So him seeing the heights that he took the program to, it wasn't surprising at all. And I think he's without question one of the best quarterbacks and best players in program history.
Look, I'm currently in the play-by-play voice for A&T football. Malcolm Bell was an Aggie killer. Okay,
Yeah.
it's just it's just what I'm sorry, but it's just what it was. Jordan Reid, of course, NFL Draft Analyst for ESPN, joining us here on the program. Okay, Jordan, we're going to talk about some of the HBCU kids, of course, as well. Is there any reason to believe that Caleb Williams will not be drafted number 1 by the Bears?
I would be really surprised if he's not, and all signs point to Caleb being the number 1 overall pick. He's done everything that he's needed to do throughout the pre-draft process, and they're really enamored with Caleb. We saw it during the pre-draft stuff. We saw the contingents showing up at his pro day. Keenan Allen, who was recently traded from the Chargers to the Bears, showed up at the USC pro day. So all signs point to Caleb being the number 1 overall pick. And Donald, I would be really surprised if that's not how it turns out on day 1 of the draft.
So my team is, you know what? My team is the Commanders. I mean, I smile because we got the number 2 pick, but I frown because I had to go through what happened last season. So it's, it's bittersweet, right? I mean, Jayden Daniels to the Commanders at number 2.
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's going to come down to him and then also Drake May of North Carolina. It's just a matter of which quarterback do you see better, but I don't think they can go wrong with either one of those guys. They can go with the electrifying Lamar Jackson type of quarterback in Jayden Daniels, or they can go with the Josh Allen, Justin Herbert ceiling type of quarterback with Drake May. I don't think they can go wrong with either one of those players. Regardless, we know Washington has a huge need at quarterback, but they can't go wrong with selecting either one of those players at number 2.
Right, and it's interesting. Can you sort of, why more recently, and obviously not from you, and I'm talking to you right now, and you say Caleb Williams should go anything can happen, but you feel pretty good about Caleb Williams going number 1. But in more recent weeks, we've heard where possibly Jayden Daniels could go number 1. My question, I guess, is what are some of the pros for both of these guys? Like, and furthermore, I mean, what would make possibly the Bears decide to go with Jayden Daniels?
Well, I think it's just the electrifying ability with him. And you see on his highlights of how he's able to create and just what I call slice and dice defenses up with his running ability. And he's one of those players that is lethal inside and outside the pocket. He led the FBS in touchdown passes inside the pocket with 35, but also he was great as far as a runner last year too. That's really where he took his game to the next level, not only as a thrower, but as a runner. I mean, you could watch the Florida game and plenty of other games that he played throughout the season of where he had 400 or even 500 plus total yards in those matchups. So it's just his dual threat ability as not only a passer, but also a runner. I think he's by far the most explosive of the bunch in this year's class.
Who do you have the New England Patriots taking at number 3?
Right now, I would have them taking Drake May just because looking at their regime and what they have previously have catered to, he's the prototype of what general manager or the player that's in charge of their draft this year, Elliott Wolf. He's stylistically, Drake May is what he has preferred in years past, and he is the son of Ron Wolf, legendary general manager of the Green Bay Packers. Stylistically, Drake May is what he has really catered to in years past. So right now, I would have them taking Drake May at number 3.
And so again, it just in talking, I know you're going to come out with your final mock draft on April the 23rd. You have one that's currently out, but some of the talk is Drake May is kind of falling back. So how do you compare Drake May and Jayden Daniels?
Well, I think with Drake, there's a lot of decision-making questions and then also accuracy question marks with him, just because he'll have one play of where he throws a 60-yard bomb to a wide receiver that's absolutely perfect. He drops it right in the breadbasket. And then the very next play, he'll throw a simple 5-yard route into the dirt. So it's like, man, these shades of highs and lows with him. Is he ever going to figure it out? So that's the big question mark with Drake. Can he just consistently be a model of consistency and just eliminate those consistently inconsistent moments? That's going to be the big question mark about him. But with Jayden Daniels, he made that big leap, like we've seen with Joe Burrow, another former LSU player that went #1 overall in the draft a few years ago. He made that big leap that we did not see during his first few years, even going back to his career at Arizona State. So it's just the consistency with Drake May. And can he bundle all of those traits together and reach that Josh Allen, Justin Herbert type of ceiling that we essentially saw from Jayden Daniels already last year?
Former North Carolina Central quarterback, current NFL draft analyst for ESPN, Jordan Reid, joining us here to talk some National Football League draft here on the program. How good is Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Best player in this draft class, regardless of position. Marvin has been my best player at the top of the draft board since August, since I started watching these guys last summer, and that has not changed at all. I think the testament of how good he is that everybody in the stadium knew last year who was going to get the ball for Ohio State's offense. It was number 18 in those Buckeye helmets, and he was able to produce. And Ohio State had subpar quarterback play last year, going from C.J. Stroud, who had a phenomenal rookie season last year for the Houston Texans, to Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord was not a very good player for them last year, but Marvin was still able to produce. You talk about elite hand-eye coordination, a big wide receiver that has small wide receiver movement skills. And oh yeah, the genes and the makeup are not too bad either. You talk about somebody that has a Hall of Famer as a father. That's something that's always going to give him some extra points in draft rooms.
We're talking National Football League draft with Jordan Reid, NFL draft analyst for ESPN here on the program. Jordan, let me step aside and take this break. We're going to come back. I want to talk more with you, a couple of other names, and then I want to talk about some of the HBCU kids that have an opportunity to get drafted. Keep it locked to Box to Row. Welcome back to Box to Row. We're talking some National Football League draft with Jordan Reid, NFL draft analyst for ESPN, former North Carolina Central quarterback, understudy to Mel Kiper Jr., as he put it. Is doing a phenomenal job, as a matter of fact, for ESPN. Who are some, before we talk about some of the HBCU players, Jordan, who are some of the maybe players that are being slept on in this year's draft that could maybe be sneaky first-day guys or early second-day guys?
That's a great question. I think there's quite a few guys that I think are being really slept on right now. The first one is Jayden Newton of Illinois, and he was seen as consensus first-round guy coming into the year, but we just haven't seen him during the pre-draft process. So he had surgery for a Jones fracture in his foot that he played all of last season through in January. So we weren't able to see him at the combine, and he's expected to have his pro day for NFL teams on April 16th. So next week he'll get his opportunity to show that he's fully healthy. And if he shows that he's fully healthy, I think he's a player that's going to continue to climb up those draft boards. So keep an eye on Jayden Newton, a defensive tackle from Illinois.
Okay, let's transition a little bit. We talked about yourself, then Malcolm Bell, then Davis Richard. Like first time saw him play, he was I think third on the depth chart. Came in, played well. This was 2019. You saw him. You could say, man, this guy can really, really play. And we're here now. And I got it. He got injured, in the All-Star game, in the HBCU game a little bit. How good is he? What opportunity does he have to play in the National Football?
I think he has a good one. And it's unfortunate that he did suffer the injury in the HBCU Legacy Bowl, just because there were a lot of people looking forward to seeing him throw at the Pro Day, which happened a couple of weeks ago. But unfortunately for him, he's not going to be able to participate in that type of stuff. But I still think he's going to get an invitation to rookie mini camps. I've actually had an opportunity to talk to some people close to him, and he's rehabbing right now. I was at a practice for North Carolina Central spring practice a couple of weeks ago, was able to see him. He's in really good spirits. So a lot of teams have had a lot of good high remarks about him, and I think he's one of the more highly ranked HBCU prospects in this overall draft class. And we haven't seen an HBCU quarterback drafted since 2006 with Tavares Jackson when he was coming out of Alabama State, which is a very long time. So I'm definitely cheering for Davius. He's a player that I've had an opportunity to develop a relationship with, especially with him being in the NCCU quarterback fraternity. And he's arguably the best one of the bunch over the 70, 80 years of the program. So he was a very, very good player for the
Yeah.
Eagles over the past 4 seasons.
Yeah, no doubt. Rest in peace to Tavares Jackson. I remember that draft, and Minnesota moved up to take him in that draft. Look, when I looked at him on the college level, even this year, Davius Richard, I'm talking about, clearly the best player on the field, clearly the best player to me from what I saw. And there's some guys that can really, really play in HBCU football. What did he do, particularly his senior year, that translates to the National Football League?
Well, I think it's just his steady progression and his development as a passer. I thought when he first got to Central, he was really raw in that sense. The accuracy wasn't great. The arm strength wasn't great, but what you saw is his body not only developed, but as his body and his physical maturity got better, everything from his development followed along and expedited that process too, to where he played really well as a passer last year. We already know he's dynamic and he's lethal as a runner. That's just an added element to the package that he does provide.
Jordan Reid, again, NFL Draft Analyst for ESPN, joining us here on the program. Who are some? Before I ask you about some other guys, I want to, generally speaking, Sundiata Anderson, out of Grambling, really, really good player, SWAC player of the year, HBCU All-American, has turned some heads in some of these all-star games. Your thoughts on what he brings to the table?
A lot. And he's one player I had an opportunity to see at the East-West Shrine Bowl down in Frisco, Texas. And I thought he was one of the better players there, just because you see the dynamic ability, the explosiveness, the hand maturity, and just how he's able to get off of the ball naturally. And that's something that you saw on his Grambling tape frequently. He just understands how to get to the quarterback. And we know once you get to the quarterback, if you're able to do that consistently, you're going to be paid a lot of money in the NFL. So he's probably going to be a later round guy, maybe 6th or 7th round, but it would not surprise me if he ends up developing and sticking on the roster long term.
Anybody you have higher than that? Who is somebody HBCU wise that could go higher than maybe third day? Anybody?
Well, I don't see anybody going obviously 1st or 2nd round. I think we'll probably get our first guy maybe drafted in the 6th round. That's the earliest I see right now. But there's 2 names that are a possibility, and the first one is Anim Dunkwa. He is an offensive tackle from Howard, who I thought played really well last year. 6'8", 360 pounds. I mean, he's a mammoth-sized human being. He's another player that I had an opportunity to see at the East-West Shrine Bowl. He held his own, was really good and pass pro, moved really well, especially to be a bigger offensive lineman. We know he's a mauler in the run game as well. That's something that he really made a high remark in during his time with the Bison up in DC. And then the other, who I was really surprised by when I had an opportunity to see him throughout the pre-draft process, was Mikey Victor out of Alabama State, who played corner for the Hornets, but I think he's going to be a safety on the next level. And he had an opportunity to participate at Alabama's pro day for the Crimson Tide, and I thought he held his own. He ended up running in the 4.6s, but as far as the on the field drills, the ball skills and the transition skills were really good. So Mikey Victor of Alabama State is another name that I was really surprised by throughout the pre-draft process. He helped himself a lot.
You see some of the HBCU smaller school guys. You see what Joshua is doing with the Kansas City Chiefs. Any thoughts? I mean, I have 2 guys. In particular, Willie Drew out of Virginia State, and then Joshua Hayward out of Benedict. Your thoughts?
Yeah, both really good players. I had an opportunity to see Willie actually at the Senior Bowl, and you could tell early on that he did have some struggles, just because whenever you're talking about a D2 or a FCS player that's making that bump up, playing against that upper echelon type of talent, it's an adjustment period for them. But I thought he steadily got better throughout the week, and he really helped himself at the combine too, running in the 4.4s. Speed is always a big question that you want to see, or a check box that you want to see answered from those smaller school types of players. And he definitely was able to do that.
And then, Jordan, tell us how we can view your current mock draft. And your next one comes out, what you said, April 23rd, correct?
Yeah, so you can find my work along with my colleagues, Phil Yates, Mel Kiper Jr., as well as Matt Miller on ESPN.com. We have stuff that is coming out every single day on ESPN Plus, and then my full 7-round mock draft, all 257 picks, comes out on April 23rd. So be on the lookout for that.
Check him out on social media. Jordan Reid, NFL Draft Analyst, former North Carolina Central quarterback and assistant coach, is on the other side of things now, doing his thing in with ESPN and in the NFL Draft as he joins us here on BOXTOROW. Jordan's been a good little while, man. You hit me to something that I had forgotten about in terms of us talking until you reminded me, and I remember now. I appreciate it, my brother. Hey, look, you're doing a phenomenal job. Continued success in all you do.
Thank you as always. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Donald. Keep doing what you're doing. I follow very closely. Even though we go lengths of times without talking to each other, I follow the HBCU stuff very, very closely. It's all near and dear to my heart. I love seeing these athletes getting exposures just because they deserve all these opportunities.